In this class, we are going to discuss the parameters of having a kosher Chanukiah or Menorah. Both terms are acceptable for describing the place where you will light your candles to celebrate Chanukah, and also the proper placement of the Chanukiah or Menorah. So first of all, let's talk about what the mitzvah is in order to understand these requirements. The requirement from the Talmud is to light a candle per household. And the nice way to go about doing this is to light one candle every night for each additional night. So on the first night you light one, the second night you light two, all the way to 8 candles. But the most important thing is that you have to be lighting a candle. So the number one descriptive part of this mitzvah is to light a candle, which means it cannot be a torch, it cannot be a match or a twig. It has to be a distinctive candle. And what makes it distinctive is that it has fuel and a wick and a specific spot that it occupies. So that means that you couldn't just take a bunch of wicks lying around in a bowl and light them on every night to have some distinction. Plus, it wouldn't be considered acceptable because it would look more like a torch or a bonfire that have multiple wicks to it, not a candle which has one. So the most important thing is to make sure that when selecting or even building your own Chanukiah or Menorah, that you have a designated specific spot which will contain the fuel for your candle. The most obvious way to do this is to take a Chanukiah where you can place a candle, and the candle is fueled by the wax, the paraffin wax, or to take a Chanukiah that has little bowls on top that can be filled with oil, either a paraffin or olive oil or something of the like, and then have a wick floating in it, and lighting that wick and allow it to consume the fuel of that oil. So the most important thing is to have that. What we generally have is a Chanukiah that sometimes resembles what the menorah, the original golden menorah, looked like in the temple. Though this one is different because there are 8 branches and 1 center shaft, whereas the one in the temple had 3 branches on either side with 1 center shaft. And plus there's a prohibition on recreating the menorah in the temple, and it wouldn't be useful for Chanukah anyways. So therefore you need to have the extra arms on either side to make sure you have 8 total arms and places to place your candle every single night. So that is the most important thing. And the second most important thing is to make it something of value and something that doesn't become disgusting. So a lot of the poskim suggest that Chanukiahs should be made out of something valuable. And even if it's not something valuable, at the very least, it should be something that could last and be clean. But it wouldn't be really a good idea to use unglazed earthenware, for example, because as you light it, it will become crude and it'll become gross. And they don't feel that that's the appropriate way to fulfill the mitzvah. Okay, so those are some of the things to think about while setting up your Chanukiah. It doesn't have to all be connected, but for example, it cannot be in a circle. It cannot be in a box. The Chanukiah has to be recognizable as delineating how many nights are there. So the way that we do it is to have them all in a row. The exception is the candle known as the shamash. The only rule regarding it, the shamash must not be in the same row with all the other lights, so that way you know that it is not part of the mitzvah of the nights. It's not part of the expanded mitzvah of recognizing how many nights. So it needs to be lifted up, moved back, set aside, or just not be there at all. We tend to leave it there so that way if someone were to come by and use the light of the candles, we could assume they're not really using the light of the Chanukiah, they're using the light of the shamash. So that's just there to kind of help out the Chanukiah. But the main thing is to make sure that you have a straight line for all the candles to be sitting in. And the shamash should be set aside. You don't have to have a lot of space. The measurement suggested is about to have 1 finger breadth, which is slightly less than 1 inch in between each candle. That way they are delineated as being independent. They don't have to be connected either. They could be independent candles that are standing in the same line together. as long as they are on the same length. So they shouldn't be staggered, for example, along, let's say, small stairs, because it wouldn't be recognizable as being part of the mitzvah of Chanukah. So we've already excluded things like circles or having them in a square or anything else that's not in a line. And we also are trying to say that it's important that they be fueled in their own spot, in their own unique place. So that is the most important thing about a Chanukiah, is to have them set that way. Let's talk about the proper placement of them as well, because not only do you have to have them recognizable in their own place, but they should be recognizable as performing the mitzvah of Chanukah. They should be there to help everybody recall the mitzvah more obviously. So we call this Persumi Nisa, publicizing the miracle. So they have to be an obvious candle, and they have to be in an obvious place. So the Talmud talks about lighting those candles in the front of one's house by one's door. So that way it will be noticeable that you're celebrating Chanukah, and that people will see the light and remember the miracle of Chanukah. Specifically, the victory of the Maccabees over the Seleucids, as recorded in the Talmud and recorded in the books of Maccabees and summarized in the prayer of Ve'al Hanisim. The idea is to see the candle, recall the mitzvah. So therefore the mitzvah was to place it somewhere that would be recognized that it was being used for a mitzvah. And the Talmud defines that as putting the Chanukiah or the Menorah, your candle should be placed opposite the mezuzah by your door. The only time you wouldn't put it at that spot is if you had a courtyard entering in your house. It wasn't so obvious that you were lighting for the mitzvah of Chanukah. You would put it at the edge of your courtyard. However, nowadays the most preferable way to light it would be outside by your front door and on the opposite side of the doorpost from where the mezuzah is. So the Chanukiah will be on the left side and the mezuzah will be on the right side when you're facing the door. So that way, when you were to enter that doorway, you are surrounded by mitzvahs. And the Chanukiah candles would continue going from right to left. We discussed how you light them in a different shear, but that way you see that the Chanukiah candles will be moving, even though it's on the left side of the door, it will still go from right to left across the full length of the Chanukiah or Menorah. If it's not possible to light outside by your front door, such as there's too much wind, or you live in a garden apartment, or you live in an apartment building, there are other options. Also, too, if it's not a safe place to put fires outside, because maybe you have neighbors that don't necessarily like to see these things, it could be a problem somehow, you're always welcome to light inside. The best place to light is if you're on the ground level or within 20 amos, basically 20 arms breadth, so within about 40 feet of the ground. So you can go ahead and put the Chanukiah in the window facing the street. And the important thing is that has to be facing the street and not facing somewhere else, because you want people to see the menorah and think of the mitzvah. And also, more specifically the menorah, you want to see the candle lit in the menorah to help them recall the mitzvah. If putting it into a window isn't an option, you can place it by a table that's near a window. And finally, you can always place it on a table inside of your house. So that way you and all of your family can recognize the mitzvah and celebrate together. However, it's still preferable to light outside if possible and when possible. In places where that's not possible, one should light by their own table. So in an apartment building, one should light on the table in their apartment building, because when it's higher than the requisite amount, meaning above 20 amos, the Gemara says, people don't look up so high. Even when there's the wall of the building, and you could follow the wall up and see menorahs going all the way up to the top of the building, that still is not considered fulfilling the mitzvah in a perfectly good way. However, if you have multiple buildings that were adjacent to each other, one could light in windows or on balconies facing other buildings, because then people would be at eye level or within eye level of the menorah and see the candle at eye level, and you wouldn't have the issue of placing the Chanukiah above 20 amos. So as a quick recap of everything we learned, one should preferably set up their Chanukiah in a straight line with obvious candles, either wax candles or oil candles with their own wicks. They shouldn't be mixed or intermingled together. The candles have to be in a straight line all along the same level. One should have a shamash that's offset either above the other candles or outside of the row of the candles. It's not appropriate to place the Chanukah candles in circles or squares where they aren't obviously counting the number of days. And also one should preferably place the Chanukiah outside the front door of the house opposite the mezuzah, so one should surround themselves in mitzvahs. Where it's not possible to do this, the next best place is to put it into a window, assuming that your house or your apartment is on a low level that is within 20 amos of the ground. So that way people can see it. When you are above that height, then you can go ahead and light in your table. Also, if you're in a place that's not really a safe place to light the menorah, you can light it inside your house on your table. So that way at least everyone inside of your house can go and celebrate the mitzvah of Chanukah together.